This is Saurabh, and you're listening to my favorite talk show, The Weekly Show with Aditya.
This is episode 225 on the 24th of June 2020. The 225th episode, indeed a very special episode. But before we go on further into that, let's sit down and read a couple of pages from a chapter of the Sacred Games. For lunch, Sartaj had an uttapam sent to the station from the next door Udupi restaurant. The keen kick of the chilies was invigorating, but when he was finished, Sartaj was unable to get up from his chair. It had been a very light meal, but he was crushed, pulped by lassitude. He was barely able to get up and pull the bench from the wall, to slip off his shoes and lie flat and very straight on the wood. His arms were crossed on his chest. A deep breath, then another, and the edge cutting into the back of his thigh receded. And in the swimming drowsiness, he was able to forget details, and the world became a receding white blur. Yet a sharp undertow flung him into anger, and after a moment he was able to remember what he was restless about. All of Palukar's triumphs were going to be wiped away, made meaningless by an engineered disgrace. And once Palukar was gone, what of Sartaj? What would become of him? Sartaj had begun recently to feel that he himself had accomplished nothing in his life. He was past 40, a divorced police inspector with middling professional prospects. Others from his batch had climbed past him. He was just pedaling along, doing his job. He looked into his future and saw that he would not achieve as much as his own father and much less than the redoubtable Parulkar. "I'm quite useless," Sartaj thought, and felt very bleak. He sat up, rubbed his face, shook his head violently, and pulled on his shoes. He stalked into the front room where PSI Kamble was rubbing his stomach lightly in circles. He looked quite satisfied. "Good lunch," Sartaj said. "Absolute top first class biryani from that new Laziz restaurant on ST Road," Kamble said. "In a fancy clay pot, you know. We are getting very pish posh in Kailash Pada." Kamble straightened up and leaned closer. "Listen, you know that those two who were encountered yesterday by the flying squad in Bhayender? Gaitonde gang?" "Yes." "Right. You know the Gaitonde gang and the Suleiman Isa gang had been stepping up their war again, right? So I heard the two hits yesterday were a supari given by the S Company. I heard that the flying squad boys made 20 lakhs. You better get in the squad then." "Boss, what do you think I'm saving up for? I heard the going rate to get in is 25 lakhs. "Very expensive, very," Kamble said. His face was aglow, every pore open and alight. "But the money makes it all happen, my friend, and to make money, you have to spend money." Sartaj nodded and Kamble sank into a register again. Sartaj had once heard it from a slum lord convicted of murder, the bitter secret of life in the metropolis. Paisa fake, tamasha dekh. They had literally bumped into each other walking round a corner in a basti in Andheri. They had recognized each other instantly despite Sartaj's plain clothes and the slum lord's new paunch. Sartaj said, Arey, Behzad Hussain, aren't you supposed to be serving 15 years for offing Anwar Yeda? And Behzad Hussain laughed nervously and said, Inspector Saab, you know how it is. I got parole and now it says in my file that I am absconding in Bahrain. Paisa fake, tamasha dekh. Which was absolutely true. If you had money to throw, you could watch the spectacle. The judges and magistrates trapezing blithely, the hoop jumping politicians, the happy red nosed cops. Behzad Hussain had the grace and good sense to come quietly to the station, and he was very confident and wanted only a cup of tea and a chance to make a few phone calls. He made jokes and laughed a lot. Yes, he had thrown his money and watched the spectacles. All of this police jhanjat was only a slight waste of time, nothing more. Paisa fake, tamasha dekh. Kamble now had a family standing in front of him. A mother and a father and a son in blue uniform short pants. The father was a tailor who had come back home from the shop early in the afternoon to get some suiting material he had forgotten. On the way, he had taken a shortcut and seen his son, who was supposed to be in school, playing marbles against the factory wall with some faltu street kids. The mother was doing the talking now. Sahab, I beat him. His father shouts at him. Nothing helps. The teachers have given up. He shouts back at us. My son, he thinks he's too smart. He thinks he doesn't need school. I am tired of it, Sahab. You take him. You put him in jail. She made the motion of emptying her hands and jabbed at her eyes with the end of her blue pallu, looking at her hands and finely muscled forearms. Sartaj was certain that she worked as a housekeeper, that she washed dishes and clothes for the wives of executives in the Shiva housing colony. The son had his head down and was scraping the side of one shoe against the other. Sartaj crooked a finger. Come here. The boy shuffled sideways. What's your name? Shailesh. He was about 13, quite wise with a stylish floppy hairdo and flashing black eyes. Hello, Shailesh. Hello. Sartaj smashed a hand down onto the table. It was very loud and Shailesh started and backed away. Sartaj grabbed him by the collar and twisted him around the end of the desk. You think you are tough? Shailesh, you are so tough, you are not scared of anyone. Shailesh, let me show you what we do with tough taporis like you, Shailesh. Sartaj walked him around the room and through a door and into the detection room, lifting him off the floor with every stride. Katekar was sitting with another constable at the end of the room, near the squatting line of chained prisoners. Katekar, Sartaj called. Sir, which is the toughest of this lot? This one, sir, thinks he's hard. Narayan Swami pickpocket. Sartaj took Shailesh so that his head wobbled and snapped. This big man here thinks he's harder than all of us. Let him see. Give Narayan Swami some dum and let the big man see. Katekar lifted the cringing Narayan Swami and bent him over, and Swami struggled and jingled his chains But when the first open palmed blow landed on the back with an awful popping noise, he got the idea. With the second one, he howled quite creditably. After the third and fourth, he was sobbing, "Please, sir, please, no more." After the sixth, Sailesh was weeping fat tears. He turned his face away and Sartaj forced his chin around. Want to see more, Sailesh? You know what we do next. Sartaj pointed at the thick white bar that ran from one wall to the other, close to the ceiling. We put Swami on the ghodi. We spring him up on the bar, hands and feet, and give it to him with the patta. Show him the patta, Katekar. But Shailesh, looking at the thick length of the strap, whispered, "No, don't." "What? Please don't. You want to end up here, Shailesh, like Narayan Swami?" "No." "What's that?" "No, Saab, please." "You will, if you keep going like you are." "I won't, Saab, I won't." Taj turned him around, both hands on his shoulders, and walked him towards the door. Narayan Swami was still bent over and flashing an upside down grin. Outside, sitting on a metal chair with a Coke bottle clutched between his knees, Sailesh listened quietly to Sartaj. He sipped his Coke and Sartaj told him how people like Narayan Swami ended up beaten up, used up, addicted, in jail and out of it, wasted and tired and finally dead. All of it from not going to school and disobeying his mother. "I'll go," Sailesh said. "Promise?" "Promise." "Promise," Sailesh said and touched his throat. "Better keep it," Sartaj said. "I hate people who break promises. I'll come after you." Sailesh nodded and Sartaj let him out. At the station gate, the mother hung back. She came close to Sartaj and held up her fisted hands and opened them. In the right, there was the twisted end of her pallu, and in the left, a neatly folded 100-rupee note. "Saab," she said. "No." Sartaj said no. She had oiled hair and reddened eyes. She smiled barely and held up her hands higher and opened them further. "No," Sartaj said. He turned and walked away. Katekar drove with an easy grace that found the gaps in the traffic with balletic timing. Sartaj pushed his seat back and drowsily watched him change gears and snake the gypsy between trucks and autos with less than inches to spare. Sartaj had learned to relax. He still anticipated a crash every few minutes, but he had learned from Katekar not to care. It was all about confidence. You went forward and someone always backed off at the last moment, and it was always the other. Katekar scratched at his crotch, growled, "Eh?" and stared down. A double-decker driver forced him to an absolute stop. They took a left and Sartaj grinned at the white swagger of the turn. "Tell me, Katekar, who is your favorite hero?" "Film hero? What else?" Katekar was embarrassed. "When do I watch movies?" He jiggled the gear stick and wiped a spot of dust from the windscreen. "When there is some film on television, which was only all the time. I like to watch Devanand." "Devanand? Really?" "Yes, sir. But he's my favorite also." Sartaj liked the old black and white ones where Devanand listed across the screen at an impossible angle, unbelievably dashing and sublimely suave. In his limp perfection, there was an odd comfort, a nostalgia for a simplicity that Sartaj had never known. But he had expected Karthikar to be an Amitabh Bachchan extremist or an enthusiast of the muscle boys, Sunil Shetty or Akshay Kumar, who stood huge on the posters like some new gigantic and bulging species. Which Dev Anand film do you like best, Karthikar? Karthikar smiled and tipped his head to the side. It was a perfect Dev Anand waggle. Why, sir? Guide, sir, of course. Sartaj nodded, of course. Guide was in bright 60s color, all the better to savor the intense and ecstatic love that Dev found for Wahida and the bitterness of his final tragedy. Sartaj had always found the long drawn Sartaj had always found the long drawn out death of the guide almost unbearable to watch. All his loneliness and his withered love. But here was Karthikar with his unexpected Dev sympathies. Sartaj laughed and sang. गाता रहे मेरा दिल. Karthikar bobbed his head and when Sartaj forgot the lyrics after Tu hi meri manzil, he sang the next couplet all the way until the antara. Now they were grinning at each other. They don't make movies like that anymore, Sartaj said. No, they don't, sir, Karthikar said. They had a clear stretch of road now all the way up to the intersection of Current Chowk. They sped past clusters of apartment buildings to the right, ensconced behind a long grey wall, and on the left, untidy shacks of a basti opened doors directly onto the road. Thicker stopped at the light smoothly, coming from headlong velocity to an even halt. There are rumors about Parulkar Saab, he said, wiping the inside of the steering wheel with his forefinger. What kind of rumors? That he is ill and is thinking of leaving the force. What's his illness? Heart. This was a good rumor, Sartaj thought as rumors went. It might have been Parulkar himself who started this one, working from the basic operational principle that a secret was impossible to keep, that everybody would know something soon, and that it was better you should shape the wild theorizing that would take place, steer it, and find advantage in it. I don't know about him leaving, Sartaj said, but he is considering his options. For his heart? Something like that. Karthikar nodded. He didn't seem too concerned. Sartaj knew that Karthikar wasn't a great fan of Parulkar Saab, although he would never speak badly of him in front of Sartaj. He had said once, though, that he didn't trust Parulkar. He had offered no reasons, and Sartaj had put his suspicions down to enduring anti-Brahmanism. Karthikar didn't trust Brahmins and he disliked Marathas for their middle caste grabbiness and greed and Kshatriya pretensions. Sartaj could see that from Karthikar's OBC point of view, there was justification enough for his prejudices. Look at history, he had said more than once, and Sartaj had always accepted, without question, that the backward caste had been treated horribly for interminable centuries. But he argued the caste politics of the past and present with Karthikar and challenged his conclusions. They had always left those dangerous topics amiably enough. Finally, Sartaj was just glad that Karthikar's history hadn't included uppity Jat Sikhs in any immediate way. had known each other for a long time and Sartaj had come to depend on him. They pulled into a narrow parking space in front of the Sindoor restaurant, fine Indian and continental dining. Sartaj reached back behind his seat for a white Air India bag.
He squeezed
Past a Peugeot, past a panwala at the gate, and then waited for a line of white-shirted executives to pass. From where he was standing, he could see at a diagonal across the road a large white sign with red lettering, Delight Dance Bar and Restaurant. Sartaj's shirt was drenched, plastered to his back from the shoulders to the belt. Inside Sindoor, the decor was altogether wedding shamiana, down to the band instruments behind the cashier's booth and the mehndi frills around the edges of the menu. Katekar sat across from Sartaj in a four-customer booth, and they both lowered their heads gratefully under the heavy wash of cold air from a vent just above. A waiter brought 2 Pepsis and they both gulped fast. But before they were halfway through, Shambhu Shetty was with them. He slid smoothly in next to Sartaj, neat and trim as always in blue jeans and a blue denim shirt. This ends the reading of a chapter from the Sacred Games. Remember, we are still on chapter 1. Hope you enjoyed the reading. Now let's turn our focus onto something more interesting. Episode number 225 and the celebration of 2 years of this legendary talk show, which we will be celebrating with a special guest this Friday. Who the guest is, I will let you know, but that will be kept a secret until it is revealed on Friday morning. Not often do you see a talk show celebrate 225 episodes as well as 2 years. Remember, this is a stand-alone talk show, not a news channel, neither a radio channel. But there they do not usually keep a tab on number of episodes produced. But here it is very important to keep a tab on the number of episodes produced and the plethora of guests who have appeared on this talk show till date. 225 episode means we are already a legend in the history of talk shows. Not only is the talk show a legend in the history of the talk show, so is the talk show host, who is not only a host but a producer, editor, as well as the director of the talk show. Let's then ask the question, what is a legend? Who is a legend? How does one define a legend? Is legend all about the experience, the time spent in a particular field, the skill gained over the years, or doing the same thing again and again, which fans and fanatics come to love over the period of time? 2 years may not seem like a long time, but the time spent in curating each episode with the same effort, keeping the momentum going, because it often happens that after a certain number of episodes, the momentum falls. One is not able to sustain that effort. I have seen episodes having a gap of 2 to 3 weeks. Well, you have the right to take a break, but you do need to come back, otherwise people forget you. How other hosts and other episodes work, that's not the focus of the discussion today. The discussion is celebrating 2 years on Friday as well as celebrating 225 episodes today. That's the focus. And the focus is on defining what a legend means. In that case, I can say that with full chutzpah that I am a legend in the history of talk shows. No talk show produces 3 episodes a week. Hardly any talk show reach 225 episodes, let alone 50 episodes. And this is only a generic observation. Most talk shows would have fallen flat during these 3 to 4 months. But I improvised. I knew I was not going to stop just because external situation had changed. For me, nothing had changed on the outside. I was going to produce my talk shows the same way any other person would do it. But enough of that. Since the discussion is also about legends in their particular field, well, this individual is a well-known person but not well-known enough to make it to the headlines of major electronic and print media. But it's important to talk from the point of view of when one needs to stop, especially when it comes to the field of sports. Last time I talked about retirement. Athletes retire due to a number of factors: the age, their mind versus body, which gives up fast, the external stakeholders, the passive and the active stakeholders, and this individual who has been in the pro wrestling business for nearly 3 decades finally called it a day. And it was not directly but a part of a docu series which was produced. The name of the series was The Last Ride, and when you give such titles to a docu series, it is but an indication that this individual is calling it a day. Then, of course, the question had been how long would this individual carry on his gimmick in the pro wrestling world? Do you know who I am talking about? I will give you a subtle hint. One of his favorite moves is the choke slam. His other finishing maneuver is the tombstone pile driver. Do you get it? Still no? Well, I'm sorry if my listeners do not get who this individual is. He may not be like a Roger Federer or a Pele, but he is certainly an important character in the field of sports entertainment. And it's never about being a fanatic, it's about understanding. Age does make a difference. And now my question is that this individual had a match against another great wrestler who had been part of this business for the past 2 decades. So my question for this week is, against which wrestler did Undertaker have his last match?
Was it
A regular match, or was it a specially cinematic themed style crafted match? Answer this question and you may well be a guest on my next episode. While Undertaker and the rest of us contemplate his retirement and discuss his last match with another wrestler, let's move on to a different topic, a topic I have been discussing for the past couple of weeks. The International Cricket World Cup versus the Domestic Cricket World Cup. I have already said that the International Cricket Board, the Indian Cricket Board, the Cricket Australia, they all are still thinking which of these two tournaments are of prime importance. If you look by pure entertainment and the athletes showing their skill, it is of course the International World Cup, because you are playing for the country. The nationalism, the patriotism, the hyper-nationalism comes across in the International World Cup. But if it is all about money, if it's about earning a livelihood for the respective players, the commentators, the coaches, and every other active and passive stakeholder involved in the conduct of this tournament, then the domestic World Cup has the higher priority. You must have read in newspapers, seen in television shows, heard in radio shows that if the domestic World Cup doesn't happen, or what is known as the Indian International Premier League, then there will be a loss of more than 4,000 crore. So the balance of scale tips on the domestic World Cup side because of the money involved, the stakeholders involved. But which tournament is easier to conduct in terms of travel and lodging? That's a question which is very difficult to answer because the International Cricket Council has not yet decided that whether they will postpone the International 20 over World Cup. But the Indian Cricket Board is keen to jump on the bandwagon, and they are trying to convince the International Cricket Board and the host country Australia, the Australian Cricket Board, Cricket Australia, that it will be difficult for 16 teams to be lodged and accommodated. They will have to be under quarantine, biosecure environment, and whatnot. And also because Australia has travel restrictions. But on the other hand, the Indian Cricket Board is more than willing to host the domestic T20 World Cup. If you ask a current player which tournament would they play, they know that they are a fixture in their country. They would not be thrown out even if they don't perform up to the highest level. But if they are talking about a livelihood, and livelihood has become an important question over the last 3 to 4 months. For most players, it's livelihood versus hyper nationalism. The domestic international debate is quite perplexing. For example, another so called legend, and we know who this person is, may or may not play for the country again. And there are a lot of players like this when they reach a certain age. I talked about that in my previous episode last week on Wednesday, so please refer to that. But when they reach a certain age, they know that they may or may not be part of the team if they don't perform, if they don't live up to the expectations of their employer, the cricket board, the fanatics, the passive and the active stakeholders, the broadcasters, the multi-sponsors. So they may or may not play for the country for a while when they reach a specific age. They may not retire, but they may not be selected. But when it comes to playing for a domestic team, whether it's the Hyderabad Deccan Chargers, the Sunrisers Bangalore, the Mumbai Super Kings, the Chennai Indians, the Royal Challengers Calcutta, these teams will want certain players. For example, Warner, even if he reaches somewhere around the age of 40 in next 3 to 4 years, if he is fit and he has become an important part of a certain team, for example, he plays for Sunrisers Hyderabad, formerly known as the Deccan Chargers. Remember, Adam Gilchrist was also playing for Deccan Chargers and he played till the age of 40. Likes of Warner, Smith, Finch, Stark may say that they will play only the test matches or the one-day matches for their country. That is playing for their country, that is the part of hyper nationalism. But when it comes to a domestic team, when it comes to their own Big Bash League, that is
the Australian T20 Domestic World Cup,
as well as the Indian T20 Domestic World Cup, they will want to play as long as they can stretch. I can give you the example of a certain Brad Hodge. He played till the age of 40 for his team Adelaide. he would have retired early from his nation's team. He was not a part of the country for a long time. He wasn't that iconic a player as far as the international team went. But as far as the domestic part of it went, he was an important player, a key player. He played almost till the age of 40, 41. Yes, the international domestic debate continues to rage on, and in part, this is influenced by football. The Euro 2021 has been postponed. The Olympics has been postponed, but the organizers did everything to make sure that the domestic slash league tournaments like the Bundesliga, the Serie A, the EPL, and the plethora of football tournaments that are around the world, they restart. Euro 2021 may or may not be played. It will not affect anybody. But the domestic side of it, a Messi may or may not play for Argentina, but he will play for every domestic, premier domestic team that is there. So this is that domestic international
debate. Take the example of such tournaments in the US, the NFL, the AFL, the NBA, the NHL. There are no bigger tournaments than this. A World Cup is not that critical in US. Then there is the NHL, the NFL, the AFL, the NBA, and so many others. The Major League Baseball, the Minor League Baseball, that is what most college students strive for scholarships.
Let me remind you, Messi and Ronaldo are no longer young in the definition of sports. Both are between 30 and 40 years of age. They have reached the age where they may or may not play for their country. The country's administrators may or may not select them, but as long as they have the legs, they have the energy in the body, they will continue playing for their domestic team. That is the likes of Barcelona, Madrid, and other teams. I'm very curious to see what is the decision taken by the International Cricket Council. How much of a role does the Indian Cricket Board play in influencing them to postpone the World Cup? And how much does the Australian authority say that they may or may not be able to host it? And if the Australian government declares that they may or may not be able to host it, I have no idea if this has happened or not. But let's hypothesize, because this is exactly what is going to happen. Somehow or the other, the Indian Cricket Board will make sure that they keep reiterating that they are ready to host the domestic T20 World Cup, that they will make sure that the players are in quarantine. It's held in closed doors with limited staff that includes only the broadcasters, that the players follow all the rules that are there for sports players and others. So this international domestic debate, which has been raging on for weeks, when will it culminate? When will these three important boards involved in the conduct of this tournament and other cricket boards who may or may not want to send their players? Remember, for the domestic World Cup, the cricket boards play a minor role. It is the players individually who decide whether they will go or not. Not every player from every country goes. There is a select group which plays in the domestic version, and they have separate contracts with the management of these teams. All they need is NOC from their respective cricket boards. And if the International World Cup doesn't happen, then the domestic World Cup will happen. And why will a domestic World Cup be in a better shape? Because for the International World Cup, the cricket boards have to do some kind of investment expenditure on the accommodation, the lodging for the players. But when it comes to the domestic side, the Indian T20 Domestic World Cup, the cricket boards have zero role. It is the players and the contract between them and the team. It is the team management or the owners or franchisee or whatever nomenclature we would like to add. They do all the expenditure and they are more than ready to do that expenditure. It will be a very interesting situation as to which of these two tournaments gets the upper hand. As of now, it's 50-50. Right now, neither the Indian authorities nor the Australian authorities are saying anything about hosting it. They are tight-lipped, though the two cricket boards are more than ready to host. But the permission and all the licensing that is needed to host, it has to come from the powers that be. So it's very interesting to see which of the sports ministries of the two countries will agree to host. Let's see what happens. This ends episode number 225, a very, very special episode of a very special week on the 24th of June 2020.
For more awesome content, tune in to the next episode of the weekly show with Aditya.